my officers were checking this morning. They told me that the LIBOR is now at 5.2%, benchmark policy rate, while Euribor is at about 2.4%. The latter was actually negative at the beginning of this year, now at 2.4. To climate change effects resulting in floods and prolonged droughts, increased tendency for protectionist policies and non-tariff barriers in the region, slowdown in China and the Euro area, and now the Ebola epidemic. All of that has happened in the last 3 years. But despite these different shocks, which have brought a diversity, we are still a very solid and resilient economy. The fiscal space and complex trade-offs. It has been like getting out of ICU and then getting knocked first by a truck, that's COVID-19, then by a Land Cruiser, that is inflation, and finally by a border, tightening of financial markets. Luckily, we are still here, we are alive, and importantly, we know where we are going. Uganda's economy has been very resilient and continues on its recovery path. This is not by good luck. It is on account of good economic management in the past, today, and in the future. The government has had to make a very difficult policy trade-offs. Number one, promoting growth versus containing supply-side inflation. Should we promote growth or should we first arrest inflation? That's a trade-off we had to make. Number two, fiscal support versus debt sustainability, allowing more pass-through effect of the international prices to the domestic prices. And number three, credit growth versus financial stability risk, particularly increased non-performing loans. We had to make that trade-off. The results of making sound economic policy are quite numerous. First, I will comment on economic growth. Although projections have been revised downwards from 6% to 5.3% this fiscal year, it remains quite high compared to the global and regional growth forecasts. The global growth is forecast to slow from 6% in 2021 to 3.2% in 2022 and to 2.7% in 2023. Sub-Saharan Africa GDP growth is projected to slow down from 4.7% in 2021 to 3.6% in 22 and to 3.7% in 2023. This is due to global inflation and the tightening of the global financial conditions, in addition to a series of other economic shocks. So, compared to the region and international figures, when we project the domestic growth of Uganda, the GDP growth, at 5.3%, we are still in a very good shape. This growth is mainly projected to come from increased government incentives or initiatives to the private sector, as well as the different interventions government is making and planning to make, including the parish development model, the investment in oil and gas sector, the growth in regional trade, but most importantly, our main bet is on the support to the private sector, because it's the engine of Uganda's growth and recovery. It's designed primarily to support the private sector recovery, including putting a moratorium on new taxes. We haven't introduced new taxes, and also we haven't raised the current tax rates. We have also reduced domestic borrowing, and we are going to continue monitoring and reduce it further, as well as the several budget-supported interventions that some of which I've mentioned, many others, you know already those interventions, and others are coming. The drop in global crude oil prices has also translated into a reduction in the annual inflation for energy, fuels, and utilities. Monthly inflation for energy, fuels, and utilities dropped from a peak of 3.5% in June this year to negative 2.3% in October this year. And we expect it to reduce further. Tax administration has also improved and will continue to improve. This last period, since the beginning of the financial year, July to October 2022, saw URA collecting a surplus of 142.9 billion shillings compared to the target that we had given them. This has come as a result of improved tax administration, closing the gaps in compliance, because there is no much room for increasing rates and so on. So it has been mainly in getting those who are supposed to pay tax to pay. We only tax those who have made money. We don't tax anyone who's not making money. This growth is equivalent to an annual nominal growth of revenue of 17.4% compared to the collections in the same period last financial year. The current projections indicate that revenue to GDP ratio for this financial year, 2022-23, will be about 14%. When I turn to export receipts, these have also improved. Merchandise exports, export receipts increased from $3.029 billion, about 11.3 trillion shillings, in 2020-21 to US dollars $3.836 billion. That's about 14.4 trillion shillings in 2021-2022. In particular, coffee receipts, the money we have earned from coffee exports has increased from $555 million, that's about 2 trillion shillings, in 2020-21 to $62 million, about 3.2 trillion shillings in last year. Non-coffee exports increased from $2.1 billion to $2.5 billion during the same period. So we have seen improvement in exports across board. When I turn to foreign direct investment, this has rebounded to $1.22 billion for the financial year ending June 2022, compared to $920 million in the 12 months before 2022. This is mainly in the area of oil and gas and the minerals sector. They have been the key drivers of this growth in FDI. Our international reserves remain adequate, about 4 months of future import cover, and we are monitoring them very well, as the Deputy Governor will tell you. The Uganda shilling appreciated by 0.1% against the US dollar in October, a slight appreciation, trading at an average rate of 3,822 per dollar compared to 3,825 in September. It has since even performed much better, as Bank of Uganda will report. Now I turn to the short-term interventions to strengthen economic resilience and mitigate global and domestic shocks. I will start with fiscal consolidation. Here, we are doing 4 main things. Number one is in the area of managing the domestic revenue mobilization, ensuring that we implement our domestic revenue mobilization strategy. That strategy, which was authored a few years ago, a couple of years ago, now we are effectively implementing it. Improving tax administration, including digitization by introducing digital stamps and electronic receipting system to reduce tax leakage. Also, we have embarked on a tax expenditure rationalization effort. Here we are focused on reducing the leakage of revenue through tax expenditures, tax exemptions. And we are mainly focusing on putting in place a credible criteria for determining the beneficiaries and also monitoring those exemptions. We are also carrying out a cost-benefit analysis of the tax expenditures or the tax exemptions to ensure that what the beneficiaries promise, they deliver on them. We are putting in place sunset clauses in our tax exemptions, such that the beneficiaries get to know that these exemptions are not perpetual. And they will be monitored. When you don't perform, we stop there. But also in ensuring that we monitor effectively these exemptions. So we are working with our partners, development partners, and other ministries, departments, and agencies to implement this plan, which we have agreed on. We have agreed on it as government. But I want to make it clear, a rationalization plan does not mean phasing out exemptions. No. The exemptions all the tax incentives will still form part of our investment incentive framework, only that now we shall be monitoring them a little bit more effectively than we've been doing. We are also, under the medium term, within our fiscal consolidation, working to reduce government domestic borrowing so that we can support the private sector. As I already indicated, and I'm going to expound on that, we are also scaling down government expenditure, especially on activities that do not enhance growth and instead prioritize more export sectors and import substitution. We are also working to reduce supplementary expenditures in the budget, which have been a major cause of unplanned domestic borrowing, to be restricted to the legal 3% under the law, and themselves being for those activities which were unforeseen, unavoidable, and most importantly, some of them in the area of industrial policy to support the economy. We are also ensuring close monetary and fiscal policy coordination to re-establish macroeconomic stability, especially curbing the rising inflation. I would like Ugandans to know that policy credibility ascends from close policy coordination and also in avoiding populist policies, ensuring that what government does is the right thing. We have stuck on this, working closely with the central bank. The central bank, when inflation increased, they increased the policy rate, the central bank rate. And government of Uganda, this one, they increased it quite fast, from about 6.5% in April to 10% in October this year. Within that short space, the CBR jumped with all of those basis points. On our side, on the fiscal side, in quarter one of this financial year, beginning July, we released only 18% of the budget, compared to about 25% that the ministries, departments, and agencies of government of Uganda expected. This was largely to support the Bank of Uganda efforts to fight inflation, but also to avoid borrowing at a wrong time. Domestic borrowing at the time when BOU was raising interest rates would have crowded out the private sector, as interest rates would have risen sharply. So when we took a decision to reduce the release so that we release the cash that we have, mainly the money collected by URA, it actually worked because it supported the stability of the domestic market, and the private sector was hit by the shocks, but not including the shock of government borrowing. We have also been supporting economic growth, especially the private sector during the pandemic, by keeping the economy open and also preserving jobs through a series of policies, both monetary and fiscal. Bank of Uganda credit relief measures They helped in having the private sector restructuring their credit, their loans with the financial institutions. On our side, the tax reliefs, and we are now working on how to support further the private sector by looking into the tax penalties, especially on SMEs. Those which we can waive, we shall waive them. On expenditure efficiency, we are rationalizing the money-consuming government agencies, authorities, and even parastatals. That conversation has now gone to Parliament. Very soon it will be debated, Cabinet finalized the analysis, and we are looking at how do we make the government more efficient. We are also improving public investment management to ensure value for money and positive returns on investment by government in our projects. We have revamped the entire PIMS for projects. No project will enter the budget again when it's not fully studied, and studied for economic, what we call economic appraisal, not just the financials. How, in other words, how is it going to contribute to the growth of the economy and the welfare of Ugandans? We are also focusing on growth-enhancing activities and ensuring adequate funding on the maintenance of our road infrastructure going forward. As you can see, our roads, we have opened up a lot of tarmac, but the old roads have decayed. So we are going to put more emphasis now on maintenance, and we are putting in the money very soon. Supporting business development services, including implementation of digitization and e-government, will also help in reviving our economy. And on government side, we have digitized most of the government systems. In the government now, we pay electronically. Money paid electronically is more traceable. There is an audit trail on it. And we hope this will help in improving the governance. We are also digitizing procurement. We have already enrolled a number of ministries, departments, and agencies, and by the end of this financial year, we shall have nearly 100 of them on electronic government procurement, where people will procure now as if they are on a WhatsApp group. You know, in a WhatsApp group, there is total transparency. As you are typing, all members are seeing that you are typing. When you delete, it remains there, rather than as deleted. And members ask, what have you deleted? So we want now procurement to be also carried out in that format. It will enhance transparency and reduce on the corruption. We are also digitizing our payroll. The human capital management system is now in place, and it has already started to bite by identifying ghost workers where they have persisted. These days you hear a number of people telling you that, especially in local governments, our salary, there is something which has been going on in the area of the payroll. The government of Uganda has enough money to pay everybody that they legally recruited. It has the first call on our budget. It's a statutory obligation of government. But now to hear some people saying we haven't been paid on time, okay, we had some issues of the system at the beginning. Going forward, it will be the responsibility of every single accounting officer to account for every coin given to them to pay the people that are employed under them. And that system is already identifying some ghost teachers, even ghost schools. Imagine, an entire school is a ghost. All of these are going to be identified by the digitization effort. I know, fellow Ugandans, we love one major debate, the debt level of our country, on whether our debt is sustainable, and so on and so forth. I see a lot of headlines and debates, both in formal media and social media. I want to let you know that Uganda has a target which is enshrined in our Charter for Fiscal Responsibility to keep our public debt to GDP ratio within the threshold of 50%. It's very well planned and calibrated. Whereas our public debt to GDP ratio is currently at 48.6% as of June 2022, debt service cost has, however, risen, raising concerns, especially in terms of the liquidity ratios needed to service this debt, which is projected at 33.2% of the revenue we collect, the domestic revenue for this year. That's what we project, that it will go to about 33.2%. We are mindful of this, and we have a very good plan of managing it within the levels that are sustainable. As I always say, the first major tenet of debt sustainability is transparency, ensuring that debt numbers are given to those who are supposed to know them, and those are the people of Uganda. We give you all of these numbers, but still there are those who say, are you really telling the truth? Is that the debt? For us, we think it is more than that. Please, in the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, we don't have any stronger rooms for keeping anything. All of the numbers are on the table. And I want to tell you that we are very mindful on keeping the debt of Uganda sustainable, and we are doing this by prioritizing borrowing at concessional and near concessional terms wherever it is available, reducing domestic borrowing and substitute part of it with cheaper external borrowing, and we have started on that. And due to high interest rates at which banks are offering to lend us money, we have deliberately declined that money in the first quarter of this financial year. We haven't borrowed money from banks which Ugandans cannot afford to pay back. That's why we took a hard decision to instead reduce the money that we release to government institutions. We basically borrowed for debt redemption, but not for NDF. We took very little money on the NDF side, and we shall continue to monitor and ensure that this is done. Now, instead, we are in the process now of borrowing about 500 million euros to replace about 2 trillion shillings, which had been planned for domestic borrowing. The cost of servicing this external loan will be half compared to when we borrow this money domestically. From this decision alone is estimated at Uganda shillings 2 trillion over the next 10 years. So we are going to save Ugandans the burden of paying about 2 trillion shillings they would have paid if we borrowed the highly priced money domestically. And at the same time, we shall be able to give Bank of Uganda some reserves and also ensure that this money is mainly invested in export-oriented activities so that we are able to earn foreign exchange to service the debt quite more comfortably in the medium term. We are also ensuring that the funding available in the climate financing window intended to finance green investments and boosting climate change adaptation is tapped. We are accelerating regional trade and integration to boost exports. We are deepening financial inclusion to boost domestic savings as well as the financial sector. As I conclude the next budget, ladies and gentlemen, for 2023-24 is going to be a budget which is fully aligned with the program-based planning and budgeting principles. We have revised the plan, the NDP3, to fit into the new realities, which I started with. The COVID-19, the inflation, the interest rates which are high, meaning higher borrowing costs, and so on and so forth. Priority in this budget is going to be focused on revamping and expanding our railway transport. We are also going to focus on electricity transmission and distribution. We are going to focus on irrigation, particularly solar-powered small-scale irrigation. And we are also going to focus on supporting private sector development by ensuring that we increase the access to low-cost capital and also by investing now more practically in business development services. But all in all, by ensuring that human capital development still leads the way. Human capital development has the largest call on our budget. In the current budget, it's at 29%, and we want to keep it as the #1 priority because it invests in people. In conclusion, the remarkable fact is not how much government does to control economic activity, but how much it does not to do that. One economist called Arthur Lewis said the secret to development is good government, adequate rainfall, and a reasonable secondary education system. Our grandfather of economics, Adam Smith, for him attributes it to peace, good taxes, and a tolerable administration of justice. All of the rest being about or being brought by the natural course of things. In other words, as government, we shall continue to provide the fundamentals, the peace and stability, the environment in which the private sector can flourish with an efficient, equitable, and good tax system and a tolerable administration of justice. All of the rest being left to nature. We're a religious country. God is with us. And I want to assure you that Ugandan economy will remain very resilient. Thank you very much.